Greetings, M Squared here, and today we're going to talk about parallel and perpendicular lines. So the learning target is that you can write equations of parallel and perpendicular lines if you're given another line. So let's recap what parallel and perpendicular lines are. Parallel lines are lines that have this that are in the same plane and they don't intersect. And perpendicular lines intersect to form right angles. So don't intersect, intersect. And remember, right angles, that means 90 degrees. Well, the cool thing about slopes in parallel lines is that their slopes are the same. How else would they never intersect? So here's two parallel pens. They're not going to intersect, but the minute I go like this, eventually they're going to intersect. So perpendicular lines are going to intersect at 90-degree angle. And there's a special relationship with slopes. So slopes are the same here, and here they're negative reciprocals. So if I have two perpendicular lines, if this slope is -2, this slope would be +1/2. Negative reciprocals. So if you don't know what this word reciprocal means, some people call it reflippicals, but a reciprocal of a number, of a fraction, is just you flip it over, right? So 2/3 flipped over is 3/2. Those are reciprocals. They're also called multiplicative inverses because when you multiply two reciprocals together, you get a 1. You see, if I multiply these two, 2 times 3, 3 times 2, that's 6/6, that's a 1. But when I say a negative reciprocals, that means one of those would have to be negative, and then I get a -1 if I multiply them. But basically, you have to remember that a reciprocal means you flip it over, and the negative is you change the sign. So if it started negative, then the other one would have to be positive. If one started positive, it has to be negative. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to look at writing an equation that would be parallel to this line, and writing this line, and writing an equation that would be perpendicular to it. So it's all about slope. So the first thing I find is my slope. My slope is 3. Okay, then I know that the line parallel to it is going to be 3, and that the line perpendicular to it is going to be the negative reciprocal. So the reciprocal of 3 is 1/3, negative reciprocal is -1/3. So then I can just make up anything. I say y equals 3x plus 7. That's a line parallel to that one because it only has to have the same slope. Can't have the same y-intercept or else it's the exact same line, and we're not going to do that. Perpendicular, y equals -1/3 x plus 2. It's perpendicular because its slope is the negative reciprocal of the original slope. Okay, x equals 4. Well, that's a little tricky. What's its slope? Do you remember what its slope is? Its slope is undefined. And so if this slope is undefined, then its parallel slope has to be undefined, and then this one has to be 0, because the reciprocal of an undefined, remember, like an undefined would be like 4/0. Well, the reciprocal of that would be 0/4, which is just 0. And remember, 0 doesn't have a negative. So keep in mind, this is a vertical line, and a perpendicular line would be a horizontal line. So we would just say x equals 2, any old x equals some number, and then this one would have to be y equals any old number. Okay, so here we go. We have another line, but we don't have the slope, so we've got to find the slope first. So y equals, if I divide everything by 2, and here's what I do. I do 6/2x, and I don't even care about this next part because all I need is the slope. The slope is 3. Now I know my parallel line is going to have a slope of 3. I didn't mean to do that. The same. And this line's going to be -1/3. Okay, so y equals 3x minus 100. There we go. That line is parallel to it. Y equals -1/3 x. I can even do it that way. I don't even have to put a y-intercept. That one is still parallel because the slope is negative reciprocal. Okay, let's try this one. -2x. We're going to subtract 2x from both sides. And then we have -3y equals -2x. Remember, I don't even care about that because I'm just trying to find my slope. But if I divide by -3, I get y equals 2/3 x plus 5. So what's the slope I need? 2/3 for parallel, -3/2 for perpendicular. And then it's just y equals 2/3 x. I'm just going to do it like that. And y equals -3/2 x plus 7. Okay. Now, can you look at this? Here's my equation. y m is equal to 5. Can you see any other lines that are parallel to it, perpendicular to it, or neither. That's our question. So if you want to pause for a minute and think about it, try to do it on your own, that's good. I'm going to go for it. Here we go. I know that parallel line is going to be 5 and that a perpendicular line is going to be a negative 1/5. So real quick, I just look and I say, I see y alone and I see a 5. Y is alone and there's my slope. Because slope, it would just be switched around. So I know my slope here is 5. I'm just going to go through it. My slope here is negative 0.2. Now since I have a fraction here, I need to make sure what 0.2 is. Well, 1/5 is the same as 2/10, and that's 2/10, and it's negative. So actually, the slope of this is negative 1/5. Over here, I would subtract 5x from both sides, and then I would divide by 2. So y would equal negative 5/2 x, da-da-da-da-da. But what's my slope? 5/2. I'm just going to find my slope in all of these. If I did this one, I'd get 5y equals negative x plus 2, and when I divide by 5, I would get m equals negative 1/5. Here, if I get y on that side, I'm going to end up with negative 7 over 35 for my slope. Well, how many times does 7 go into 35? 5 times. So what do I end up getting? 1/5. Negative 1/5, negative 1/5. Negative 1/5. Okay, so now I'm going to divide, no, y is by itself. If I add 6 to both sides, that's still my slope. My slope is 5. Here, divide by 3. What's 15 divided by 3? 5. So my slope is 5. What's my slope here? 1/5. Okay, so anytime there's a 5, that's parallel. So I'm going to look. Okay, this one is parallel. I'm going to abbreviate there. That one's parallel. Sorry. Can't spell. Parallel. The symbol that we use in geometry for parallel are 2 lines like that look parallel. Any more 5s? Yes, this one's parallel. Okay, I checked off all my parallel ones. Now I'm going to do perpendicular. So this one's negative 1/5, and here's the symbol for perpendicular. But you can also write perpendicular. Do I have any more? Negative 1/5. So that's tricky because that's 1/5. That is neither. This is perpendicular, and this one's perpendicular. And this one is neither. So sometimes you'll be asked to say, hey, is this line parallel, perpendicular, or neither? And it's all about the slopes. Okay, so next is writing. And we're going to start with our little steps. We're going to find the slope of the line that has been given to us. Because we're always going to be given a line, and then they'll say, write an equation of a line that is parallel to such and such a line and goes through such and such a point. So the first thing we have to do is find the slope of the line that we were given, because that tells us whether we need to use that same slope or whether we need to use the perpendicular slope. Parallel, use that slope. Perpendicular, find the reciprocal, and I should have said negative reciprocal. Okay, use that point that you're given and the slope that you just found to create an equation. And at this point it says use point slope or slope intercept. It doesn't matter. So we have already done each form, but now you can choose whichever one you want to do. Okay, so we have a line given to us. It says write an equation of a line that goes through this point and is perpendicular, so that's going to be my negative reciprocal, to this line. So I say, oh, y is by itself. That's nice because my slope is right in front of x when y is alone, so I know my slope is negative 1/2 of this line. And now I have to decide, do I use negative 1/2 with this point, or do I use the negative reciprocal with this point? And it's all about the perpendicular. I already wrote it down. It says negative reciprocal. So what is the negative reciprocal of 1/2? Negative 1/2. It's 2. So now my y-intercept, my slope, messing up there. My slope is 2. And I don't have a y-intercept. What do I have? A point. I have a point and a slope. So the easiest form, in my opinion, to use is point slope. So I say y minus, and I take the y of that 1, sub 1, equals m times x minus, and I take that x sub 1, and clean up the negatives, and there's my answer. Y plus 5 equals 2 times x plus 3. That is the equation of a line that goes through this point and is perpendicular to this line. Okay, Let's try it again. First thing I do is find the slope. Slope is given to me. It says -3. So it says write an equation of a line that goes through the point 27 and is parallel. If it's parallel, I use this slope. That's what I should have said. So I'm going to use the slope -3, and I'm going to use this point. So the only thing I use this line for is to find the slope I need. So now I'm going to use these two. And again, it's giving me a point and a slope, so I prefer point slope form, but I'm going to show you both ways. So I would say y minus y sub 1 equals m times x minus x sub 1. That's my equation. But if you didn't want to do it that way, remember we could use slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. And in that case, we substitute the x, the y, and the m to try to find our b. So we would say 7 equals -3 times 2 plus b. That's a -6. So we get 7 equals -6 plus b. We're going to add 6 to both sides because our goal is to find our y-intercept. We already know our slope, right? Our slope is -3. So we find that it's 13. And so then we are ready to write an equation of our line. So y equals -3x plus 13. So either one of those work. It doesn't matter. When I give you questions like this, I won't tell you what form to put it in. You get to choose. So write an equation of a line that goes through -1, 4 and is perpendicular to y equals 7. Well, notice there's no x. What kind of slope? Do you remember what kind of slope a y equals 7 one has? It's a 0 slope. And the reciprocal of a 0 is an undefined slope. So that means we're going to have an x equals line. And so to me, these are the easiest ones if you remember that. What does x equal? It equals -1. So my equation is x equals -1. If you wanted to graph that point, -1, 4, something like this, the slope of 0, y equals 7 would be up there. There's my slope of 0. The perpendicular of that would have to be this, because we don't want a 0 slope, we want an undefined slope. All right, good luck with parallel and perpendicular lines. M squared signing out.